For the last year, I've been the Director of Planning and Construction for Tacoma Public Schools. For the 16 years leading up to that, I was on the architectural side of the table, designing public K-12 schools in Western Washington. For the architects and engineers in this field, the $64,000 question is, how do facilities actually facilitate educational delivery? And by that I mean, how does the built environment reinforce the different pedagogical models that we have today? For most of the schools you see and that we're used to, they're based on a design that's over 100 years old that started with the one-room schoolhouse. With that, as the industrial age shaped and created a demand for more students, the efficiency factor came in by just plugging in those one-room schoolhouses in chains and in double-loaded corridors. And that's the model that we see for most of our schools today. With that type of classroom, there's a basic assumption that there's a front of the classroom, that there's rows of desks where students are expected to be obedient and quiet. And at the front is a teacher, the sage on the stage, that's the keeper of all information. And it's their job to disseminate that information, and it's the job of the students to sit there and absorb it. Over time, we've known that this system has worked for many students, but we know that it doesn't work for all. And so what we're looking at today is really, how do we personalize the educational experience? How do we engage students in their learning? And that's where Montessori comes in. Montessori is such an elegant response to that problem. It has its roots in peace and grace, and has this opportunity to let the students explore their own educational path and work through it on their timeline. As we move forward with Geiger and we started looking at how Montessori would work in a public school environment, we looked at some of the basic principles of Montessori. And you can see obvious pieces as you walk around the school, the trinomial cube that's reflected in our railway rails along stairs and guardrails, and also in our wainscoting. But if you dig deeper, you see a school that's much more connected to the natural environment, and that is really well suited for Geiger. Since Geiger's mascot is the orca, the teachers from the get-go wanted a facility and a site that reinforced and helped them teach environmental stewardship. And so we created a story at the beginning of the design process of how do we tell a story of how man shapes the environment and what's our responsibility, what's our role. And so on the far east side of the site, which is our highest point on site, we always treated that as kind of the lowland foothills where we have more of a natural setting with trees and opportunities to get out on grass plains. And then as you start working your way down into the site, you see how the hand of man shapes the environment. You start seeing rusticated retaining walls. And then as you progress further down into our learning courtyard, you see more defined, clean lines of concrete and an amphitheater with connections to the classroom. And in the amphitheater, you see a metaphorical pool in the middle that is the collecting point of water. And we really used water to help tell this story, because what we do with the water and how we treat it, if we pollute it, we're sitting in a site that's directly above the waters of the Puget Sound. And what we do with the water is really important, and that statement has to be taught to the kids that we need to keep the water clean, and while the water is on our site, we need to do what we can to channel it and clean it on its way. Our automobiles, our pollution, we do a lot of things to the environment that affect that. And so we have biofiltration swales where water in the parking lot is cleaned. And then as you go out on the playground, you actually see the kind of, again, the metaphorical river deltas collecting the water from the roof and channeling it to the low point in which it exits back into the watershed of this area and down into the waters of the Puget Sound. Along the way, you'll see in the learning courtyard that we have a 5,000-gallon above-ground cistern that collects water off of our rubber roofs, which gives the kids an opportunity to reclaim some of that rainwater and use it in our gardens. We also have a rooftop garden area where kids can get out and get their hands dirty, and there's planting beds for all the classrooms so that they can be coming together and see the circle of life through plantings and do scientific work and experiments and dovetail that into their everyday life. And so when we took on this project, Geiger was a breath of fresh air in terms of figuring out a new way to engage kids, figuring out a way to really personalize the experience. Geiger is the second Montessori in Tacoma Public Schools, but it's the first that was built ground up for that purpose. So, welcome to Geiger, and I look forward to hearing back from Paula and hearing how things went and what you guys saw and what you liked. Feel free to walk around, and I hope you enjoyed the time.